record to the cloud, and I'll spotlight you for everyone. So. Welcome, everybody. We'll give it a second for everybody to enter the room, and then we get going.
Here we are.
So we're still waiting a little bit for giving people a few more minutes.
All right.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, without screaming. I tell you, when you teach on Zoom, you find yourself screaming like all day.
It's a little loud though, Kenny.
Is it?
Yeah, I think it will affect the piano, so.
It's better news. Okay. How about now?
Perfect.
Perfect. Oh, good. How about this?
Sounds good.
I'm having trouble hearing, even though I have my volume up the whole way.
Oh, so, but is anyone else having trouble hearing?
No.
No,
So what do we do about that?
maybe you want to use headphones, Philip.
Oh, that's my problem. Thank you.
Okay.
I can hear fine now. Thank you.
Am I the problem?
Awesome.
No.
Yes. I just have my headphones on. I wonder why my picture is not showing up on the screen.
I would have no clue. But yeah, I'll
Okay.
mute.
You have to take off that, if you go into preferences, there's a thing that asks you, do you want there to be a maximum of how handsome somebody could be in order to show the picture? You're going to have
Thank
to take that off, man, in order to get the picture up there.
Right. I think we should
What do you think?
give it a go.
Okay, the boss says give it a go. Here we go.
All right, we're doing this. All right.
We're doing it.
We're doing it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our event tonight. My name is Joseph Driesen. I am a director of alumni affairs here at Berkeley. Really happy to have you here tonight. Over the last few years, we've definitely transitioned to more webinar style events. So we're really happy to be able to partner with Kenny and Vivian and Effortless Mastery Institute to bring you all this event tonight. As is kind of typical for these events, if you don't mind muting yourselves, that would be really helpful. We are going to have a Q&A at the end. But for the first half of this, we're going to be listening to Kenny and enjoying his presentation. A little bit more background about our office. So the Alumni Affairs Office is really here to help create connections, to help alumni and external audiences stay connected to the school. So that could be through social media, events like this, mentorship, volunteering. We really want to make more avenues for everyone to stay connected to their alma mater. If you want to be more involved with any aspect of Berkeley, I can put my email in the chat and you can send me a note after the event. A couple things that are coming up this month, if you're looking for more. We have an event next Monday night, actually in person at Berkeley NYC. It's a musical theater workshop with current undergrad students and current master students at Berkeley NYC. The students will be performing some of the master students' current works. So we're excited for that. We have another webinar, Inside the Interview, with the Career Center on March 23rd. They're going to be breaking down interview techniques. So if that's something you're interested in, be sure to check that out. And finally, on March 28th, we're going to have a panel with SAG-AFTRA and all about their music legislation wing. So again, if these are some topics you're interested in, feel free to check them out. Our mentorship program is coming back this summer. Alums, you might be receiving a link to sign up for that in the next few weeks. So keep your eye out for that. But finally, let's get to the good stuff. Kenny Werner, most of you know him. Kenny Werner, he's a pianist, composer, author. Most of you probably know him for his book, Effortless Mastery, Liberating the Master Musician Within, which is a renowned textbook for improvising for musicians and other artists. He was awarded the 2010 Guggenheim Fellowship Award for his work, No Beginning, No End, which is a musical journey exploring tragedy and loss, death and transition in the path from one lifetime to the next. He's worked with numerous high-profile artists, including Charles Mingus, Ron Carter, Joe Lovano, Bobby McFerrin, John Scofield. But we like to say they worked with Kenny. He is the founding musical director of the Effortless Mastery Institute here at Berklee, and he has composed for international orchestras, received numerous grants, and has even been nominated for an Emmy. So Kenny has a new book out called Becoming
Grammy.
A Grammy. Oh, we got to
That's the
fix
second
that.
time someone said it, so they must have the copy wrong, Vivian.
We gotta fix that.
Yeah.
Grammy. Forget the Emmys.
I'll take an Emmy.
Yeah, I mean, who would? But Kenny has a new book out called Becoming the Instrument, Lessons on Self-Mastery from Music to Life. And we're going to hear more about that tonight. So Kenny, you want to take over?
Yes, the world. Okay, so here we go. Seeing you guys, alumni, and I'm an alumni, there's so many things we could talk about. We could talk about the Effortless Mastery Institute. We could talk about implementing effortless mastery. However, this particular one is, of course, related because it's related to, after 25 years, I wrote another book. Boom. And they, believe it or not, insisted that I be on the cover. It's the only thing I didn't want to be on the cover. I wanted people to think of the title, Becoming the Instrument. That alone spurs, I think, rings a few bells. Because it's a lot easier when you're the instrument than when you're the player. When you're the player, you have all these decisions to make. When you're instrument, you're absolution. Whatever comes out comes through you, this instrument, into that instrument. And the rest of the book is how a human being can get there. Since many of you might have read Effortless Mastery, and it was and is a really successful book because it happens to touch on the frustration of more people in music than the people who are getting what they want from music. More people are not getting what they want from music. And that turns out, everybody liked the book, but particularly people thought that there was a ray of hope in there. If you were trying to get to what you originally was hoping for by becoming a musician. It goes without saying that a lot of us have turned left and turned right. It also goes without saying that the act of going to school could have taken away a lot of the momentum people have, because in a way, ignorance is bliss. You play your music and you're enjoying it. You're ignorant of what else it could be. And it turns out that even if you did go to school, you've got to ignorant yourself as to what's going on when you're playing. When you're playing, you want to fuse the idea that everything I play is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. Failing that, everything I play is exactly the right thing to play. Why? Because I played it. And that's really how artists have distinguished themselves, not always by being the best player, but being completely connected and committed to what they played, because they had a much more blanket default position. Many musicians, even good musicians, their default position is, should I have played that? Oh, maybe I should have played this. I wish I could play this. And why didn't I study that many years ago? And blah, blah, blah. If you know effortless mastery, you know that most of that context comes from the conscious mind. And that stuff from the conscious mind rarely ends well. In other words, people don't think about their fragility in their music and then say, wow, I just had a great time really thinking about what I can't do well. It never ends well. Not only does it never end well, but it also ruins the moment you're in. So I divined a lot of lessons in absolute wisdom from knowing music. If I was trying to teach life, I would be unconvinced because I'm still studying it myself. In music, I think my attitude towards myself and music is impervious. Nothing I could play would change my basic understanding of my value. And when you think about it, that gets so common, even though it's totally irrational. If you were asked, do you actually find your value as a person goes up and down depending on how you played, like even the last gig? And it's amazing, even many years out of school, you may still find that that's the case. So what Effortless Mastery pointed out is, well, here's the basic conundrum for effortless mastery for musicians. Because now what this book is extending it to its similarities with anything that's in the whole world and how it really works. But you can get the perfect lesson from a music example, and then you can apply it to anything in your life. So, there are things that we do that sabotage our playing. Ironically, they're based on so needing to play well. So Effortless Mastery in the bottom usually puts out this thing. Think about a time when you really needed to play well, how important you thought music was, how important you thought that gig was. How'd you play? So most people will say that's when it was really hard to connect to something they might have been playing on Tuesday in the practice room, but now it's, that's when they have trouble playing. And then I say, what about when you don't think too much about what you're doing, or you're playing with people that you trust and they trust you, or you're playing a bar mitzvah and no one's listening? That's also takes the pressure off. But whenever you thought for some reason it didn't matter, how'd you play? Most people will kind of say, much better. So right there, we've kicked off the course of Effortless Mastery. If by your own admission, by your own contemplation, you realize that the times you played, it was hard to play, were the very times that it was so very important to play. And that you accidentally played better when you accidentally didn't put a lot of meaning into it. Then the meaning was in the music, not in the pseudo meaning of what this is about. So if that's the case, the next thing I would always say is, now that you know that trying to play well is probably the thing that most gets in your way, you're never going to try again, right? And then they usually laugh, because even if you're sure by your own experiences that you play better when you don't take it that seriously and when you don't try, you will find after 3 bars you're trying again. And this opens the door to Effortless Mastery as a therapy. Because why are you trying again after 3 bars? Because even though intellectually you realize now, maybe you never thought about it, but you know it's true, that you play better when you're not trying harder. But now it gets down to the brain and neural pathways. If you have a neural pathway that judges yourself by playing the instrument, it's hard to just realize you shouldn't do that. You created that path by walking the same path over and over again. If you want a new path, and this is confirmed now, I was stabbing at this in the dark, 30 years ago, just thinking, I think when you're used to trying, but now the science has caught up, the neurology, the psychology, and the spirituality. They all point to the same thing. If you believe that your value is not relevant to how you play today, you're likely to play better more often. If you believe in, that value, then you can say, whether I play good or I play bad, I offer myself forgiveness. Because I don't want that ruling, that occupies entirely too much of most people's life. Moving from gig to, did I do it there? Did I blow it here? If that's music, really, quitting is the most powerful statement you can make. because music it offers so much more than that if you're not in your ego. So effortless mastery keeps getting simpler, and it boils down to this. Effortless mastery is separating the body from the mind and the mind from the ego. So what happens, you realize much more of your performance than you really thought originally is only muscle memory. It's not a lot of philosophy. If your body knows where the notes are, they'll play them. Will your mind stay out of the way? Yeah, if you've separated your mind from the ego. But if the ego is still part of the mind, it'll constantly find ways of intruding. And then think to yourself, have I ever tried to change what I was playing in the middle of playing? Did that ever work out? I'm pretty sure no. What happens when I'm playing and I suddenly think, oh, this should be more burning? Does it burn harder? It does for 1 to 2 bars. And then you're overplaying. You were listening to a voice in your head, which is not helpful. So then the question is, and if you read Effortless Mastery, which I assume a lot of people did, but I don't know, but there's 2 main corridors of the brain that happen. Well, one of them is what we dwell in, which is what puts a cap on our happiness, possibility of happiness. And the other one is what we want to reach, very simply, because it is a liberation from the first one. That's the conscious mind, and then, if you know the book, the space. So let's just talk about the space a little bit. The space there's a name for that in every religion, every neurological principle, superconscious mind, psychiatry, psychology. Now it's, as it's reviving again, the whole thing of psilocybin therapy and all that. And what happens? You're just able to ignore the patterns that were previously scorched and burn a new pattern. That's a temporary effect of something external like psilocybin. But developing a pathway where when you play, the mind is either receiving it or even enjoying it or loving it, or the mind's not involved. So the mind doesn't play that role that it plays entirely too often, that of critic and commentator. Now, that's something you might have been doing to yourself all your life, or you might have started doing it more when you went to school, because there was enough other people to critique, and when that judge creeps inside your head, then you're already been cut off from more than you would gain by going to school. So actually that I describe in this book, but I've been saying it as a joke for a long time. You get MSD, you contract MSD, which is music school disease. So a music school disease goes like this. You're being turned on to so many concepts, and you're given a short amount of time, unrealistic, to learn things, and you eke them out, but you don't really own them. And it's all about what people have told you could be doing other than what you're doing. So you get to the point where if you happen to play something and it came out nice and easy, it must be the wrong shit. Did anyone actually get that warped by going to school? If you played something that just flowed, simultaneously it's the suspicion it was the wrong shit because it was too easy to play. When that happens, you need to see, go to your local doctor and see if you suffer from MSD. They're even, but then you need a break. You need to reset, because the only thing worth practicing when you're playing is enjoying your playing. The only thing. There can be many reasons why you're not enjoying your playing, but you don't want it to be just a psychology of constantly putting yourself down. I'd rather play badly and not criticize myself than play well and always manage the music. Managing music is okay, but it's not the magic of that performance that you've seen or even the first one you saw and never forgot. There's something slightly metaphysical going on. What's metaphysical going on is not just that they're trained, and they're not always virtuosos. So it's not that they're trained, but they are totally down with whatever it is they're going to play. If you don't lose the habit that we pick up in university of questioning yourself while you're playing, you'll probably live a life of, these like quick, you do your own juries. Well, that gig was okay. I did have that one bad moment, and like, wow, music has been reduced into another little hammer you can hit yourself over the head with. It can be changed. It can be reprogrammed. And the first book is totally about that. What exercises would you do to change the patterning so that when you heard a sound, your first instinct was to accept it? Then a little step higher than that is accepting it with gratitude. And if you can get to this, loving the sound you're making without even listening to it. Because the more you listen to it, the more you find something not to love. But the therapy of your own playing is just going with at least receiving it. So the simplest way that humans play, the body, one thing I realized as this effortless mastery developed things more, it's not us that plays, it's the body that plays. So when you want to change your playing, you want to re-educate your body to play different phrases or different rhythms. Whatever it is, you want to move something from an intellectual understanding to muscle memory or move in that direction. That's why nothing learned in school was ever retained, or very few exceptions. And they pay me to say this, so it's okay. They know there's something wrong, not with Berkeley, because I think Berkeley just gets more and more exciting to me. Something wrong with the university system. And I guess it doesn't matter in a lot of other careers, but you kind of can't get away with it in music. See, because even if you're studying to be a lawyer, and they're absolutely ridiculous in how much work you're doing, but you're not going to retain any of that. But you can always stop the tempo and go to that wall of books that's supposed to be in your office, that back wall with all those big legal books, and pull something out and look it up. Or even a doctor can look something up before he goes into real time. Musician, once you count it off, you only can play what you know. And what you can't know is quite clear because you don't play it. Now, what confuses it is the confusion between practicing and playing. So with the ego, people practice, but with a real impatience to be able to play what they're practicing. That's the sabotage point right there. By needing it to happen in a certain time, and that time is usually by yesterday. That's how fast we want it, and that's what we want. What do we want? Virtuosity. When do we want it? Now! We should go out and do a that's one of those, right? Anyway, so my point is that's exactly what gets in the way of the practicing. If you practice something and you're willing to stay with your unfamiliarity with it, then you will notice that progressively you're getting familiar with it. And it's all about ego and, myopic thoughts. And it's a kind of a narcissism because you're always wondering, how do I sound? How do I sound? That doesn't even seem so unreasonable, does it? How do I sound? But if we were talking about conversation and I said, for example, Bob, when you're talking to me, what's your goal? And you say, Kenny, when I talk to you, I want to sound good. Well, then you can see that even that is a shallow goal. What I'd rather be able to do is speak my mind, speak my passion, even speak my truth. The other issue may be one of language. So it's not that you're not giving it up because you're inhibited. You're not giving it up because you didn't go far enough in certain foundations in the language. And so if you don't manage it, they will abandon you, like say the form of a tune or the rhythm, or is this still one, or did one somehow become two, or, all that stuff when you were studying, and hopefully not now, but could be, because these infirmities last forever if you don't conquer the ego a little bit or move the mind away from it, so that you can see. If you move the mind away from it, the mind is useful for telling you what you need to work on. All you have to do is play without the mind, and the body will play only what it knows. And if you reach beyond that, you'll notice you can't stay in that space anymore. That's all clear stuff. But the mind has to stay out of there to find out what you know. And then when it finds out what you know, it has to keep feeding you an even, what do you call it? Whatever. You know what I'm saying? An even platform so you don't put yourself down before you even get to working on it. So effortless mastery is kind of taking away these things that how we sabotage ourselves, and it's so common that people don't even realize it until maybe you have a discussion like this, So this has consistently, and then about 6-7 years ago, I actually wrote an email to Roger Brown. I was getting up there and thinking, I don't really need to be going to the airport all the time, and wherever. And I thought, I'm going to make the decision to teach what has already been so valuable to people for reading the book. And so I sent Roger Brown an email and came right back. He said, Kenny, we'd be honored to have you teach effortless mastery here. I was a student in school and I was getting so pessimistic that I was going to quit. And I read your book. And it's been a lot like that for a lot of people. The book has its own destiny, and that destiny has been very kind to me. It's even provided gigs. Yeah, if you'll talk about effortless mastery, we'll even listen to you play. Which I'm not sure exactly how I feel about that, but whatever, So after years of doing it as semesters, I had never done a semester. I would go to a school for 2 or 3 days, help raise everybody's consciousness, hopefully, but their hope for sure. And then I'd split. And then, of course, the more established neural patterns would return. What did he say? Or he really said this and I didn't say that. Whatever they start to carp together is so that it can become uncomfortably unavailable again. Because they were comfortable with certain things being permanently unavailable. Now, Roger and Larry Simpson and even Matt Mavuglio, who was the dean of performance, they called my bluff. What would you do if you had semesters? And I had to figure out, what do you do that lasts more than 3 days? And I did. I took the 4 steps, which are actually reprogramming steps. And I said, we're going to spend 1 semester on 2 of them, just to learn how to touch this instrument without thinking. That alone, if you can retrieve that, if you have lost it, that's a great acquisition. And I'm brainwashed. When I hear that, I go, ooh, no matter what I hit. And that can happen with these programming. First, you have to even I said in effortless mastery, you have to deprogram. So practicing the first step, or even practicing just being in the space, is a form of deprogramming. So your programming might be, let's say, to obsess about your life. That's a pretty common one, right? So you spend a good amount one day obsessing about your life, and you're not getting any good answers, because no good answers are available, because they're in the future. Therefore, there are no answers. And your wiser self would say, why are you thinking about this stuff? You're not going to find anything that's going to make you feel better. So effortless mastery outside of music, which is now what this book is about, would be like this. I'm sitting around the middle of pandemic and I'm wondering, gee, Berkeley's losing a lot of money. Will I still have a job? Or I'm wondering, will I want to still go on tour when this is all over? Or how will, every thinking thing is age appropriate. So I'm at that age where it's about things that you think about if you're in, 70, which I just turned. But the ability to choose not to think them is golden. So let's say I'm thinking them and I go, wow, oh, here I am going down that road again. That never really ends well. I think I'll watch myself breathe. Now, teaching effortless mastery for all these years, my definition of how to get in that space had to get easier and easier for one very simple reason. If I am a yogi of any kind, I'm the laziest yogi you ever met. I want the fruits of that with as little work as possible. So, it started with 30 years of meditation, do the breathing first, blah, blah, blah. It never really stuck, I'm one of those people that has to really personalize it. So then I started to turn it almost into a comedy thing. Like, I could say to you right now, this would be if I was on stage and I was saying this, I would say, I want to show you an exceptional ability that God gave me. Watch this. Everyone in this room is breathing. Am I right? See that? It's a gift. Anyway, that's part of the joke. But the fact is, you're always breathing. You're breathing on your worst day. You're breathing on your best day. In a way, we're all virtuosos when it comes to breathing. So how do I get into space? For 20 seconds, and the shortness of it is kind of important. I know I'm breathing. In fact, it's not me breathing. There's a little machine in there and it breathes, right? So for 20 seconds, I'm going to drop everything that I think is important and watch it breathe. And I invite you to do this with me. Remember a few things. It's not spiritual. We're doing it for so short that you can drop everything in your life if you choose, because you can have back all your neurosis in 20 seconds. So knowing that there's really nothing to hold on to. 30 seconds of freedom is tolerable, I promise you. 20 seconds, because you can have all your problems back immediately. And that's part of the innovation too. So I'll explain more about that. And this is how you can, let's not talk about what it can do, let's do it. So everybody here is breathing, right? Do you all know where you're breathing? It doesn't take much attention to notice where you're breathing. It's the part of you that's always moving, a little out, a little in, right? For 20 seconds, pay attention to that little machine. Watch it breathe and go. And stop. And that's another innovation. Instead of trying to see how long you can do it, again, which is ego in a very muted way, you leave it before it leaves you. So did anybody feel an immediate change when I said for 20 seconds you're just going to watch it breathe? Okay, some people, and I don't know how you can indicate that, but hopefully you notice that. But let's do it again. Let me remind you, there's nothing spiritual about it. And for our purposes, there's nothing important or meaningful about it. It can be life-changing, but not if you think it's life-changing, because then you'll turn it into something else. It kind of has to be irresponsibly easy, because I want to be able to do it. And I even joke around, especially a couple of years ago when I was a little less happy about things, that this exercise is so easy, even an American can do it. So here we go, right? You're already breathing? I like saying that first. Let me give you the whole script. Oh, I'm thinking about my life. That never ends well. I think I'll watch myself breathe for 20 seconds. Go. Don't think anything of it. You can easily find it. Watch it breathe. And if you start thinking, just kind of come back and watch it breathe. It's pretty easy to watch. And stop. It's as meaningful as, let's say you're in a city and out your window there's traffic. There was traffic before you looked out the window, and I'm saying, look out the window and look at the traffic for 20 seconds. Okay. That's how much meaning I would like you to remember, because then you'd be able to do it any time. And in music, that is known as the rest. Most of you look old enough to remember the rest, but it's something that was a very popular item in the early 20th century and for all the centuries before, the rest. I would say somewhere in the middle of the century, the rest became a thing of the past. So I don't see anybody young enough that I have to remind you, a rest is like a rectangle. When it sits on the line, it's 2 beats, and when it hangs from the line, it's 4 beats. And I'm only mentioning it because it may be decades since someone saw or heard a rest. But in this case, you might be playing and trying, and if you've really practiced this, you don't go, oh, this trying to play a solo, this never ends well. No, you want to practice it outside of your life until it's like this. I'm thinking about my life. Oh, yeah. I'm back. In this moment and not thinking. And how does this relate to Berkeley or anything, or musicians? Isn't that when you've ever played the best, weren't you in fact in that moment, and certainly without expectations? And that's why it only happened one time. The next time you played terrible. Because you played so good that you weren't paying attention on what got you there anymore. You just couldn't forget how damn good you played. You know, we even use it to feel better. Oh man, I don't know where life is going. But yeah, on September 17th, I really played my ass off. It's okay. Everything's okay, you know. I mean, you know, maybe it rings a bell a little bit, you know. So from this space, you go, so I might be playing, you know. It gives, you know, allows you to keep coming back into the self and letting the music be played by the hands or the vocal cords or the hands and feet or the hands and armature. But when you withdraw the mind, you allow the body to show you how much easier it is to play that instrument. It's much easier to let the body play an instrument than have a mind that's always telling the body how to play, and much more fulfilling for a lifetime. So that's the space, the effect of the space. What I did was I restated that in a lot of this. So a lot of it is here, not the 4 steps, that's in the first book. But the notion of what that's related to, the book is it really goes and shows the similarities between many things, whether it's Kashmir Shaivism, Buddhism, neither of which I am. But you know, this stuff stops being spiritual stuff and starts being common sense. And I've had it on music for many years. But life, I've been as slow as anybody. I want to say I'm as slow as anybody, you know, or slower than anybody, because there's truths I knew 40 years ago. And I'm only doing them in the last 10 years. So understanding how you'd like to live, but noticing how you're still living is what the book is talking about. Why do you have a philosophy that you personally can't sustain whenever it's at, you know, where anything's at risk? Or you say, let's say, do you all agree that mistakes are a healthy thing? There are no mistakes. That's a popular thing now. There are no mistakes, you know. How many of you would not react if you made a mistake? That's the difference between knowing something is true and implementing that as a strategy to get what you want, which is to play better. The distance between those two, there's a moat, and that moat is practice. In this case, what you're practicing is touching the instrument without any demands, without any priorities, without any benchmarks, no recitals, no juries, no ratings. It's just a hand. And what is the hand doing? What the hand has always liked to do since he was a little boy. When you are a little child and you get in the elevator with your parents, what was the first thing you wanted to do? Press the buttons. So without ego in mind, I've got 88 buttons and I'm just pressing them. Funny thing, choices made from here are always perfect. Or they sound perfect to me. So, you know, I have another saying, perfection already exists everywhere. It's people that fuck it up. And that's in the book too, but not with fuck, because I had a few very holy people I wanted to show the book to. And one actually said, we love this book, but do you think you could change the word F dot 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 to, you know, so I did. But you see, while I'm talking, who's playing? That's the first kind of change in the operating system caused by the exercises done. You can do them just from the book, but it really does help if you have someone kind of auditing you, really showing you what those steps are. And in my classes, I have 15, 16 people in every class, and then now Vivian's teaching it. They get to spend a whole semester not just finding the space while playing their instrument as if it was some sort of, high point in your life, but you want it to become so normal that that's the way you play. Sorry, you still can't see my hand, can you? It's great because I got the computer on the right side, so I've been getting a lot more exercise with my left hand. Left hand's starting to respond. But what does it respond to? Not my mind. It responds to muscle memory. It responds to bodily commands. How am I going to let my body learn how to play better? I've got to get my mind out of the way. And then you start finding something that's infinitely more structured and strong within you than your propensity for occasionally playing well. So the same things in life, from music to life. So, and there's funny stuff in here too. I describe what's the name of the show? Twilight Zone in there that I think describes this. I quote TV as much as I do the Bhagavad Gita because everything's pointing in the same direction unless it's pointing in the other direction. But any kind of language is kind of heading us towards self-acceptance, self-love. Why should there be self-love? Because everything is a hell of a lot easier if you can find it. If you can't find it, you go for the sort of discount version, acceptance. So, effortless mastery, you still might play terribly, but with doing effortless mastery, your forgiveness for yourself is instantaneous, almost like a knee-jerk reaction. It just takes away the whole drama that many people thought was the premise of music. And it's totally irrelevant. But you have to get to a certain state of realization before you find it irrelevant. Until then, you just kind of have to presume it and you practice something. So when I move my fingers, but I'm somewhere else in my mind, or maybe I'm watching myself breathe. Oh, that's great. Because when you focus on one thing, other things disappear. So if I watch myself breathe, I don't even think of my hand. Or let's say I really focus on my right hand. The more I focus on my right hand, the more my left hand disappears. The more my left hand disappears, the more flawless it plays. So even accepting a deep spiritual or, metaphysical truth, it's not, who cares? If it makes you play better, great. If you're a fan of metaphysical truth, then you're going to find, I kept telling people during the pandemic, fortunately, there's a place you can roam that is unlimited, and that's the territory between the ears. And when we were a little stopped in what we were doing, you might argue that it was a greater opportunity to explore the landscape between the ears. And that's where all the wisdom comes from. But also, your state of mind, you will realize, is almost, well, for me it is, more important than the music itself. Not because I'm so wonderful, but because whenever I'm in the right state of mind, that's the best stuff I play anyway. So as I kept teaching it, people would say to me, gee, I practiced that at work, at a board meeting, and I was brilliant. Yeah, but in general, you want to practice it at home. You want to practice doing something without needing it to succeed. really, choices become much more liberating when they are not ambushed by the threat of success or failure. So, for example, in music, if you're going to play, if there was any notion that I'm going to question what's coming out, I couldn't play. Now, we know this in music, and most of the people that you would deem inwardly successful, whether they're famous or not, you know that there's a connection when they're playing, right? And that connection is a detour away from the usual thoughts of inadequacy. Thoughts that you don't even want to co-sign if you talk about it, but it happens to us. That's one of the things I like at Cartoli. I sometimes show a talk of two of his. He says, you don't think, thoughts happen to you. And that is very true. And looking at it that way, you say, wow, those thoughts are happening to me again. The ones I think about to try to rate my whole life, you know. I like to make a little bit of a script out of it. Going down that, and for me, it's become this, and you could have any other vision of it. There's a fork in the road. The left fork is, for some reason, I have a less generous vision of myself on the left side than the right. Because the left fork is filled with all my defects. The way I think, the way I care, the way I hold on, the way I can't let go in life. Because I can always let go in music, because I have a root assumption that if you were able to grasp the root assumption, it would automatically change everything up the pathway. That music's not nearly as important as everybody thinks it is. Boy, I tell you, that's really helpful. You could be playing Carnegie Hall, and you could have the same state of mind as if you were playing in the Carnegie Deli. It can happen. I can say, having done it and guided some people at least in that direction, that when they start feeling that angst, they know where to go. They go to their breath. For a short time, it just proves to them that what they're thinking is not necessarily factual. In fact, they know already that what they're thinking is making this thing they're about to do in a little while harder. And if they've been practicing effortless mastery long enough, they can make the switch. But if they've been practicing effortless mastery, but just the threat of playing in Carnegie Hall is enough to, you know what, I know what Kenny's saying. I can't find it, man. I really do hope I play my ass off tonight. Well, of course you do. You always do anyway. The question is, what's going to be in your mind as you're reaching the instrument? Is this going to be in your mind? Okay, gotta just get this started. There's Carnegie Hall. Or is this going to be in your mind? I mean, you're already messing around and you're in Carnegie Hall. If you're a classical player, it works like this. You have a lot more that you have to get together. That piece should not just be known well enough so that you could play it right with management, because that means it's going to be stiff when there's people out there. You want to learn it to the point where you could almost say it plays itself. Then you go out there and don't play it, because it's going to play, the body's going to play it, and what the mind's going to do is yeehaw. And it'll grow in momentum because your mind is enjoying what your body is producing. And the people that have gotten there, and of course gotten there on very highly sophisticated music, are the apex of what a human being can be as an artist. The information is mind-blowing, but it's being delivered almost subconsciously. There's nothing higher than that. Music on a very high technical level that plays itself. That's almost like a phenomenon. And we can think of the people, Keith Jarrett, John Coltrane, Herbie Hancock, certainly Wayne Shorter, and many, many players. And then there's a gray area where some sort of do that, or sometimes they do it, but then just when they expect. The problem when it happens accidentally, and you're playing the way it doesn't, everybody had at least one gig where accidentally it was all happening, what you wanted, right? So that gig, you ask yourself, well, if you're smart, you ask yourself, so what caused that to happen? Why did I accidentally play great? Maybe accidentally I gave up the pseudo importance of the gig, or somebody made me laugh, or I got high. I mean, let's face it. Why are drugs and alcohol as much part of music history as the music? Because it is what I'm saying. People are trying to find a way to touch this instrument and not go away from their own power. You know? So if, those cats in the 40s, someone took a shot. And by the way, just because they took a shot didn't mean they were going to play like Charlie Parker. But everybody played better when they were too doped up to criticize themselves. That is not the answer. You don't want to die before anyone heard you. However, that result is what I am pointing myself towards. I already have it in music, but I've had trouble feeling good most of my life. So I'm investigating, how does one feel good with the equipment provided? And I found a major piece of equipment. I didn't even realize that God was a drug dealer. If you focus on your breath, it's almost like vaping, man. You know, it's like, yeah. And then what is that crying for? Release. Everybody's running everywhere, including to their musical identity or their artistic identity, trying to find a release. And here it is. It was put in the machinery every other stroke of the breath. Every in-breath is the expansion. I'm not talking yoga here, okay? Because if it was yoga, then I can't do it. I'm talking the way I'm talking. If I watch myself go, wow, why is it 6 weeks since I did that? That felt great. But of course, you're never watching your breath because you're always watching your life. Is things going the way I want them to go? It may be a little bit yes, so yeah, okay. Now suddenly no. So now I'm not happy about this. You know, and here you are in this one, the left, what I call the left fork, right? Which I say keep moving. First it's muddy, then it's quicksand. And I lovingly call the left fork the shithole. Okay, I could go down that road of trying to figure everything out, but I lovingly call that the shithole. The right fork is the space. So I go, okay, I'm walking, starting to go down the left. I didn't realize it immediately, but I go, oh, okay. I'm wondering such and such. Yeah, here I go. That never ends well. I'll watch myself breathe for, I say 30 seconds, okay? Now remember, this is no technique that you need to have. I'm just really watching it breathe. And I'm making sure that it stays never more than that. Because if I just watch my breathing, I can't think. And if I'm thinking, I'm suddenly not watching my breathing. So the first thing this does, it plops you immediately right into the moment and the space. And why can you do it? Because it's only 30 seconds. You know, they always say necessity is the mother of invention. For me, it's a little different. I believe laziness is the mother of invention. I mean, what'd they do? They invented the wheel. What do you think? They didn't want to walk. So they invented the wheel. You could say it was necessary. It wasn't necessary. They were doing fine without it. Suddenly someone wanted a wheel because suddenly someone didn't want to walk anymore. So I say laziness is the mother of invention. So I've cut this thing down to 30 seconds and I drop all my shit because I know I can have it all back in 30 seconds. And this is the final part of this. After 30 seconds, I don't try to see how long I can stay in that space. I stop. Whenever we have felt good like that in that elusive way, that's because we've changed the quotient from the spirit and the physical universe. And for a little while, who knows what fired off in our brains, but for a little while, the spirit got a little more real estate. You can feel that. And boy, it's great when it's triggered from your instrument. and I'm in. That can happen, but the higher you want it to go, the more repetitions it will take for more years. The payoff is incremental and almost starts immediately. It's not like you ever get anywhere. It's that you're always moving towards your ideal of what life is. My ideal is not to chew on problems that I can't solve, and it's only my fear that has me thinking about them. My ideal is that I'm in this moment and not thinking about anything. As a guy that entirely thought about entirely too much shit most of his life, I'm very proud of it being able to stop thinking. Now, if I had a serious disaster or catastrophe or, emergency, I'm not saying I've developed it to that level. I hide under my piano and I whisper to my wife, honey, you go out there. Give yourself up for me. Don't tell him I'm here. So there's certainly no courage here. But I have noticed that I've worked it hard enough so that on a day where there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong. And most days there's nothing wrong. It's very rare that you're on the day there's something wrong. The rest of the time, you're dulling your senses about the present by imagining what might go wrong. And that's so common that most of us either think there's no cure for it or we think that's the way it's supposed to be. And I'm saying it's been working for me and a lot of my students. The change should be short, it should be sweet, and don't expect to change yourself. You're not really trying to change the waves of thoughts, you're trying to take a break, like a rest. So you're thinking this shit, hey, I should have been more famous than I am. I should have a lot more money than I do. This cat makes a lot of money. I mean, some of us can go through this shit, every year when they have the Grammys. So I actually laugh at myself. Yeah, motherfucker, what are these weak motherfuckers winning a Grammys for? I should win a Grammy every year, And I listen to my mind. I go, yeah, you're funny. When you can even look at what your mind is saying, you've really made the separation. If you want to take it to the spiritual realm, then there's only one quick question. Who's watching? If you're watching your mind, who's watching? So you can write that off as a purely neurological phenomenon. You could write it off as a mind thing that you can do. You could say God is watching. You could say Jesus is watching. You could say Charlie Parker is watching. And you'd all be right. It doesn't matter what exists. It matters what you believe. It doesn't matter what's true. If you're going to subject your beliefs to only what's true, you can't really believe a lot of things because they're beyond confirmation. So do I know if there's a God? In this book, I'm constantly referring to God and reminding you that I still have no idea if he, she, they exist. So by the middle of the book, I start saying God, I-H-E. And then if you look at the footnote, it says, if he exists. And from that point on, just like you would say AD and BC, I say God, I-H-E. And I can presume everything about it, but I don't have to even know that he, she, they even exists. You build your pathway through your own faith. And that is universally true. So if I believe that if I drop my demands, my expectations, that something will creep into my arms and move my fingers, and that something is some kind of, in Hindu and Kashmir Shaivism, they call it the Shakti. Some of you might be familiar with that term from even dabbling in any kind of yoga stuff. The Shakti is the goddess energy, and I discussed that in the book too. Basically, in the folklore of, or whatever you want to call it, ancient Indian scripture, there was Shiva and Shakti. Shiva is God. Shakti is his consort or his wife. And Shiva sends, it's kind of like a Jesus story, except she never manifests as a person as Shiva, as Shakti. But he sends his wife down there, and what she does is she makes everything, the world. Because everything is Shakti. So I can't prove that to you, but when I'm spiritually on another vibration, I can almost see what they're talking about, I can almost feel the atoms moving. Well, there's a good example there. A sadhu from 3,000 years ago would have told you that everything is made of Shakti. And you would have said, oh, clearly this is a prehistoric, this is not a person with any knowledge. And then I don't know how many years later they discovered atoms. So, sometimes they just sense something that science eventually catches up to. And there's a lot of that right now. So, but when you are vibrating, I've never really experienced this, but you can almost experience things around you vibrating. That's what they would call Shakti. So the space is Shakti, or it's Hashem, or it's the Holy Ghost, or it's the Holy Spirit, or it's, The question is, what belief system do I need to tap into it? Whether I really feel particularly devotional or not, how do I tap into it and get what I really want in this life? I want to feel good. I'd like to assign myself more lofty motivations, but basically all I want to do is feel good. So I have followed every path, the worst and the best, just trying to feel good. And then I found out that when I get in alignment, when my breathing is what I'm watching, or when I practice a spiritual practice and it's working, I find I'm happier. So I finally answered my question. Do I really love God, or do I just want to be happy? And the answer is yes. I don't think I love God. I don't know. I can't really locate it if it's a love thing. But whenever I get in alignment with a perceived power, I do fantastic things. So the question is, does that fantastic power have to exist, or do I just have to make it up? Clearly, overwhelming proof is you just have to make it up. Because if you think you have inspiration and you also know too many details of where that comes from, then you might also fall into the trap of saying someone else thinks that God's helping them, but it can't be, because that's not God, what they're talking about. So you get into that whole religious kerfuffle about what is and what isn't, which is probably how humans will blow themselves up. But I digress. So the point is, so I would do the first step, which is like I drop a finger and continue to watch myself breathe. That means that the dropping of the finger and the resultant sound is not my responsibility at all. You need the simplest exercise just to go there. An exercise that doesn't demand any level of playing. So you can focus entirely on imagining that you're not doing it. That's so comforting for someone that's, that doesn't even want to get out of his chair. I could play my ass off and possibly take a nap at the same time. That appeals to me. But the idea of never questioning yourself is really a skill and something to cultivate. You can make mistakes, but if you let mistakes have undue, and then this is in the book, if you let mistakes have undue weight, now you're weighing down the present with something you can't change anyway, the past. So I learned all these things through music. And they expanded as I had the gift of teaching semesters, and people coming up to me and telling me the very words I used is what they used, like this one guy, to put on he was in the army and he had to put on this protective stuff in case there was a WMD, right? They had to get this thing on so that they were safe in Iraq in under 5 minutes, and he was always late. They were always kind of chiding him about that. Oh, I should stop. I realized. Okay. And then he read Effortless Mastery, and he got it on in under 4 minutes. So there must be something there that anybody can translate to anything. And I'm grateful because this was channeled through me. This is not a job of erudition. I did not study this. I simply knew it. When I started opening my mouth, this is the kind of shit that was coming out. And then I found that people were greatly helped by this shit. So I kept doing it. And I won't lie, it really opened up my possibilities too. And everybody can do that. The more they practice an ancient spiritual practice, detachment. You may not be able to be detached, but there's never a reason not to practice it. You just have to be detached from whether it works or not. So maybe I'll hold it there. The time is telling me to do that anyway.
So we can take some questions. You can either raise your hands with, there's a button in the bottom of the Zoom. It says reactions, or actually you can, I think there's a hand somewhere, or you can put it in the chat, or yeah, you can wave and then we'll take some questions. Philip? You can, you're,
Okay, how's it now?
I can hear you.
Perfect. So what if you have to practice something that does require one of your goals is technical facility, let's say. So you can't be as simple about it. And because I sit down to play, sometimes I don't know if I want to play a tune or practice. Ideally, they should be the same thing.
No, they're not the same thing. So I thought I was about to
Okay.
compliment you until you said that.
All right.
They're
So-
exactly polar opposites.
Uh-huh.
If you're going to play, decide to watch your hands, a piano player, watch your hands play and be as generous towards yourself while they play, because they're showing you what they know and what they don't know. You're not intruding it with the usual, sabotage of how good am I playing. That's how practicing corrupts playing. When you're playing, you want to be as far away from practicing as possible. If you decide to practice, then you want to leave your ego out the door as to how good you play so that you can focus on the thing you chose to practice. So let's say you have to practice something and you have a schedule. You're going to play this thing in 3 weeks. Now you can't just wait for the body to learn it, right? Of course, there's a compromise. Depending on where you're at up to this point, you may not be able to do the space and handle this gig. In which case, you accept yourself for that, but you keep practicing. So the gig is not a reason to change what your strategy, because the gig has no relationship to what you're practicing. Your job is not to figure out the effect that how it's going. Your job is to do it. If you find the right thing to do, doing it without looking for how am I doing will allow you to do it clearer, cleaner, and longer. The only thing that discourages you is you ask yourself, well, how am I doing? Of course, the ego jumps in on that. I'll take that question. Not well. You should have learned this by now. Wasn't it too bad you didn't learn it 20 years ago? Then it gets into all that crap. And now you're carrying around drama of its making. You could say your own making, but it comes from a certain part of your mind. It delivers the bad news to the mind, and then the mind throws it into your series of issues, and now you think you're wrestling with a problem. You're not. It's only music. Luckily, it's nothing too important. See how that works nicely. Why would I beat myself up? Music is great, but it's not that important. Am I going to change my attitude about my inherent value as a human being? Not for music. Come on. And that gives you an equanimity that you might have been missing, because music typically gets to an unhealthy level. People get to an unhealthy level of respect for it. What makes it unhealthy? When they have so much respect that they don't really believe that they are worthy of playing it. There are people that will work an entire lifetime and not really key in on the fact, but they don't really think they're worthy. Everybody's worthy. On whatever level you can play presently is worthy. But if you're comparing it to what you wish you could do, or if you compare it to somebody else, no, So in that case, the gig comes and you worked hard on it in the usual way you did. Took some spots and maybe tried to see what happened from the space. Now maybe there's enough of that in there and you have a surprisingly great gig and you really get it. Maybe you just haven't had enough experience with it yet, and the gig presents an overwhelming thing that you're not ready to detach from, right? Or any of the above, Maybe you try to apply it, which I always tell people not to do, and as a result, you play terribly. So whatever that is, it's irrelevant. What are you doing tomorrow? Well, I'm going to start practicing playing from the body again. In other words, it's irrelevant unless you take them as all these benchmarks of some kind, So whatever the gig is, it is. And what you could practice, no matter how you played, let's say you didn't play well. I will tell people, if it's about this gig, then I'll give you an assignment. You commit today that you're going out to celebrate after that gig, whether it was a great gig or you completely stepped all over yourself. But you're saying today, 3 weeks before, that you're going to go out and celebrate. You're affirming that you're going to go out and celebrate even if you suck. I can't tell you how powerful that is. But you got to break, I mean, some of you may have, I don't know many people here. You got to break the hold on us that success and failure has in determining our gratitude for this life. When you see baseball players, and I don't watch any other sport, and the guy's up there and there's men on base and base is loaded. Guy hits a home run. He's running around. And of course, he's making $1 gazillion and he's so loved and worshiped, but he's so humble because as he crosses home plate, he always goes like this. Yeah, like it was you, God. Yeah. Wow, such humility. I want to see the guy strike out with the bases loaded, and before he walks away, he goes. He's not blaming God, although you could say, you struck out. My father always used to say, if you're going to give him the credit, you got to give him the blame. So forgive me, I'm a little warped, but that's what he said over and over again. But no, you're going, thank you, God. I'm just as grateful that I struck out as I would have been if I hit a home run. That's very mature spirituality. Most of us got a very immature spirituality. A little bad luck, and suddenly we wonder if they're even, is someone against us? And I have no idea. Maybe someone is. The point is I'm trying to cultivate an equanimity that doesn't really get thrown off its trajectory by something as insignificant as how he played. How he played bad or good or whatever, And as you weed that out, you'll find a consistency that you've never been able to find.
I have another question from Todd. He says, when you're watching your breath, where's your focus? Like when I'm concentrating on my breath, I'm focused on my belly or my chest or nostril, or am I reciting a mantra? I guess I'm hung
All
up
of the
with the
above.
syntax.
All of the above. I mean, I assume there's no guesswork when you're wondering where you're breathing from. Because right now you can notice that something's inhaling and exhaling, and somewhere around here. It doesn't really matter. A mantra is good. I tried it with a mantra, but the mantra actually put sort of a spiritual spin on it that I found was not as easy to detach from as just watching the breathe. Todd, and how's your father doing? Has he been cool? It's your father, right, Jay?
No, I think you got a different Todd.
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
No
different
problem.
Linhart. A different Linhart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I tried it. That wasn't cool for me, but you could try it. The point is, you're focusing. And here's the thing about breathing. If I put it this way, focus on the source of your life and let the instrument play itself. So what's the source of your life? Your breath. Actually, anatomically, nobody could disagree with that. Yet it could also be a profoundly spiritual thing. So if I want to design, when I watch myself breathe, I want to remind myself that that's if there's a God, H-I-H-E, I know that he, she, they doesn't require anything of me. If God is love, then how would I connect with he, she, they if I don't love myself? I'm sorry, but you can't, you have to diet on the self-criticism, because the self-criticism separates you from the higher power you think exists. So you see, everything's in motion towards releasing your potential. The difference is a drop on a little water drop on a kitchen table or a drop in the ocean. The drop on the kitchen table is a single unit, and it will evaporate in a minute or two, right? A drop in the ocean lives forever. So part of the game here, as I understand it, from studying from a certain gurus and teachers, part of the game is becoming more and more cognizant of the ocean that you are a drop in, and less cognizant of the individual. And that is covered in, I don't know what even subject this is, but there's such a thing as individual consciousness and universal consciousness. So how do you transition from individual consciousness, which is more, I don't want it as an external spiritual trip, because my history with that is that, then I don't want to do it anymore. I want it to become so obvious that that's what I would do even if I wasn't trying to do anything. And that's what it's gotten to. When I watch myself breathe, I'm brought in the moment, because nobody breathes in the past or the future. When I watch myself breathe, I'm not thinking. That's a reset or a rest. Now, the last part of it is after you've come back, give yourself full permission. If you were pissed off about something, give yourself full permission to go back to whatever you were doing. If you were neurotic, give yourself full permission to go back to being neurotic. If you were worried about your identity or whatever, give yourself full permission to go back to it. Because when you resist it, it actually gives it more power. So here's the deal. You're thinking about music and you're not happy about your place in music. What could you do about it right now? Not a damn thing. So you say, I'm going down that road towards what I like to call the shithole, towards rating myself in the area of music. That never ends well. I can't stop it because my mind is smarter than I am, but I can take a break. So I'm going down that road of not being grateful. I think I'll take a break. I'm already breathing. I'll watch myself do it for like half a minute. If I'm really watching myself breathe, I cannot muster a thought. I can even talk, but I cannot muster a thought. And then when you're done, feel free to go back to your drama or whatever your dream of limitations is. The idea that you have limitations, even if you do, what is the profit in thinking about that? Why not presume that your talent is unlimited and then don't get disappointed whenever it doesn't, why not presume the ultimate and then practice as if the ultimate was true? Why try to be realistic? Well, I'll never be blank, blank, blank. Even if that's true, I don't get the benefit, except that it darkens your own spirit in the moment. So this is what it's about. And I finally taken it on with several equivalent or, relative things. And it turns out they're identical.
I've had a couple more questions. So let's just, I think it's 4 of them.
Try to
So
make
let's,
short answers.
yeah. Richard Shepard is saying, what is your opinion on the immediacy of the hot moments possibilities in the cohesion of the ethereal with the logical?
I have a better chance of getting there if I don't expect it.
I love that short answer.
Yeah, can anybody deny that?
Yeah, that's right.
It's never happened when you wanted it to. It always happened by accident.
That's right. Evan Rowe is saying, going off of what Philip just asked and what Kenny just said, how would you apply this to a recording of yourself? Let's say I'm practicing and I record myself. While I'm practicing, I'm completely immersed in the moment, observing my breath. However, when the session is over, let's say I go back to listening to this recording of myself, how would I reflect on the recording of my playing being set?
Without an ego, you could dispassionately take an inventory of what's working well and what's not. But you don't want the recording to be a factor that you said in your statement, I'm still watching my breathing, I'm still in the space. Yeah, then when you watch yourself play or listen to yourself play, you can just take note of what doesn't happen when you're not trying to play. See, sometimes you obscure even what you need to work on from yourself because you're always trying to play. Don't try to play. You'll really find what you need to work on. And that'll be healthier for your overall playing. So yeah, listen to it. Take note. Maybe it sounds great because you actually were watching yourself breathing. So it sounded like it played itself. But whatever the situation is, listen in a dispassionate way. Don't take it personally. That way you can just write down the things that didn't play when you were in that space. and set up a better strategy for what you specifically need to work on. Don't forget, concept of going to school was working on at about a 90% rate of things that were irrelevant to your life. Now you have the ability of just doing something that's relevant. So if you notice, for example, your time is not that good, now instead of bemoaning that fact, you can pick a few brains about what would be a good exercise for me to improve my time without trying any harder. Well, then you have to teach the body to play in time. It is so much easier if you can just leave the identity crisis out of it. Like this music describes me. Usually it just describes what you're able to do. What describes you is everything you're not intentionally trying to show us. So some people say, I'm trying to find my voice. That's like a dog trying to chase his own tail. The next sound you make, that's your voice. Now, if you embrace that, it suddenly kind of gets like something that we want to hear. It's like kind of, it's like the chicken and egg kind of, what happens? Do you give yourself that love and permission first, and then all of a sudden the music starts to be reflective of that state of mind? Or do you have to wait till you play something that is lovable? Definitely the first thing, because if you wait to play something that's lovable, for you to love it, you're going to be waiting a long time. Except for those accidental nights where you love everything. Effortless mastery is the study of having that experience typically. And most of the time, anybody who knows my playing knows that that's what I do. And I'm not bragging about that. I'm just assuring you that that exists. Because that's the only way I play. Put my hands on the piano, and I don't even ask them anymore. But the idea is, okay, go, play. What are you going to do? What are you ready to do? And then I just let them do what they're ready to do. So if I don't have chops yet that day, I may play sparsely. But I don't think that the idea is you should start a solo sparsely. I don't even think about the music. The state of mind will determine the state of the music, and it'll be more authentic than anything else you could conjure.
I always love how you say your mind is stronger than you, but your hands play better than you.
Yeah, I fully endorse that now. I know I can't, dance with my mind. My mind will, if I just try to stop doing things in my mind, it'll be temporary. It's always been. And so I assume that it wasn't really attainable. It was only when I gave up trying to change anything, but I committed to a practice, that I could see myself changing it. So I'm not smart as my mind. I can't change what it does, but I have figured out how to take a break. So I like to say my mind is smarter than me, but my hands play better than I do. In fact, that's what led to this whole thing. If you read Effortless Mastery, in my story, you saw a guy had me, I'll just do a bridge version of it, had me just drop fingers on the instrument and without expectations. And then I said, well, can I play after that? I said, no, you have to walk away. So what was supposed to be 2 weeks was 6 days. And instead of ever tapping into that part of the brain that even hopes I'll play well, all I did was drop my fingers. And then the other hand, and then I walked away. Now this was like, I'm going, well, at least I'm finally doing an exercise that a teacher showed me. I never did any of them before because it's so easy, right? But after 6 days, I went to this party, and I even told everybody, I have not done anything for 6 days but this. So I said, please, I actually apologize in advance. Then we started to play. And I remember this moment vividly. We started to play Autumn Leaves. And I went like this. They started to move without me having to sort of push them down the road. So that was already kind of an epiphany, right? Imagine you're watching your hands play. But of course, this is the thing that locked it in. It became my philosophy for life. Not only did the hands play without my management, they played better than I do. Well, you're pretty gone on something when you find that out. The way I played, I didn't even recognize it. And they recorded it. I sounded like Bill Evans because that was my main influence those days. Back then, I didn't have enough of the technology practiced to always sound like Bill Evans. Suddenly, my hands knew what to do. And my lines, instead of 13 notes to try to find 8 good ones. They just went right down to symmetrical. They went into a symmetry that I was never able to find because I was interrupting it with the desire to play well. So then I would overplay. Does this ring any bells for you guys? You know? So now I had left my mind out of it for 6 days, and I found that my hands had intelligence. It was much more of a organic intelligence. You can't put it into words, but they know where they're going. And that was pretty expressive. And I changed my philosophy at that point. I don't think I've ever changed back, because you can't match something that takes less work than you've ever done and caused more change than you've ever experienced. That's really appealing. And that's what I've been doing. It was only 10 years later, people started to ask me, how are you doing that? I'm saying, doing what? Well, you're playing, but you don't even look like you're playing. I said, really? Oh, well, I just started doing that. You know, it was my destiny to be in this little boutique area, because I was never aiming for it. And I can't believe how many people it's helped. You know, I used to say, when people were telling me how much the book changed their life, I would be embarrassed. Because as musicians, we're not used to doing anything useful. So suddenly I did something that was so useful. I was going like, well, great, okay, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And then while I was thinking about my shit, you know, where's my next gig? Do I get a writing commission? You know, whatever, right? And after a while I started to say, you know, or my wife started to say, why don't you embrace this thing? It's very unusual. And it's a longer story, but I'm keeping it short. And that's when I decided, you know, I'm going to see what I can do from the opportunities that the book is presenting. And it's been great. I'm not the usual musician I was. It was hard to give that up because it was a thought. Well, I'm really a musician. I just happen to be able to speak too, which wasn't that common if you go back far. You know, it was amazing when a musician that really played well could then describe it. That was as surprising as, like, you know, Planet of the Apes. You know, they talk. You know, but I've had this dual talent. I can demonstrate it, and then I can explain exactly what it is, and then I can explain exactly how you might start practicing it if you want to at least grow in that direction. Because it never helps to imagine yourself doing it all. That's when you don't do anything. But can I adopt something here that grows in that direction? I'm willing to. And I've learned a lot more about it since then. Mostly, not from the music, because I was pretty healthy with music, but because of the gift of teaching it to you guys. So, honestly, at a certain point, when you can start teaching, you're actually getting the gift of reviewing this stuff over and over again. And it catches on. It really does catch on.
A couple more questions. Mark Goodrich says, how does one prepare and execute a project of accompanying someone who is speaking or reading poetry, such as you did with Gourmet on Smile, Smile, Smile?
Oh, okay. Listen to the poet, not yourself. There's a nice short answer. Listen to the poet so completely that you're willing to trust whatever your hands are playing while you're paying attention to the poet.
Awesome.
Again, that needs to be practiced. Just because I said it doesn't mean tonight you do it. So I'm only saying that to give you hope. What you can't do today, you could practice from a humble place, and you find yourself increasingly doing it, which is always nicer than just assuming you can't do it tonight, therefore you can't do it.
The next question is from Janet Stevenson. She says, how do you advise someone who has difficulty even practicing because they believe they will never be able to learn something?
Well, I teach them effortless mastery. You might be right, but who cares? If you want to work on music, you need to choose not to think that. Otherwise, you'll feel the uselessness of it while you're doing it. So remember, it doesn't even matter what's true. It's what you believe. And if I believe, at least if I was that person, I don't know how successful I could be. But I'd like to find out. This guy says if I stop beating myself up, I'll be able to practice better and play with less attachment. Let me try that next. Why do you have to decide that? Now, I mean, we all know that, But what's your exercise for seeing that you're thinking stuff that really is making it harder for you to be you in this moment, right? So now you're not interested in what your mind is saying. You're interested in how to stop it, or at least take a break and see if you can't morph that into a new technique that takes you out of whatever drama you're in, no matter how real it seems. And then life will be made up of experiences, some of which you'll be up to, some of which will be too heavy to be up to, some of which you won't be up to today, but you might find you're up to in 5 years. Anything that changes the whole life plan is got to be incremental, and it can really be small increments. But you're satisfied with them. Here, I have a statement that a lot of language came out of just this act of teaching. This one's pretty cool because it's got this balance, okay? Check it out. Your job is not to assess your progress. Your job is to access your process. It's not your job to ask yourself, well, how am I doing? It's your job to find a process. It's not your job to assess your progress. It's your job to access your process. And once you commit to it, stop asking the question. You know, it's like, and then the model that I've been using for years is like brushing your teeth. So some of you may have heard that before. You don't if you brush your teeth tonight, I don't care if you did it virtuosically. You fully expect to do it again tomorrow morning. What if that's the way you felt about anything you're practicing musically? Well, yeah, I had a good practice time. Okay. And then I get up and I'll practice it again because that's what I do. You don't have goals when you brush your teeth. And that's why you do it forever. So there's certain mindsets. If you have an ability to change mindsets, then this should be good information. For example, some people could never relax when they performed. And then they told me, well, then I started doing music therapy. And suddenly I was cool. So I said, well, you didn't have to quit performing to do music, to find that. When you're playing in Carnegie Hall, just do music therapy. Because that mindset is you're giving something to somebody. Playing in Carnegie Hall is the mindset you're trying to show somebody something. That really invites failure. But can you just change your mindset? This is Carnegie Hall. This is Carnegie Deli, which is across the street from Carnegie Hall. You know, of course you can't. That's what the practice is about. Let me practice at least halting the dysfunctional shit that wants to think right now, and focus on something that's eternal, always perfect, my breathing. And leave the word meditation out for me, because meditation is the hope of the world. But unfortunately, I've already got baggage with that word. Like there's something I'm supposed to do correctly. I could always stop and watch my breathing because I always know where it is. And I always can feel it. All I have to do is just kind of focus on it a little bit. And then not expect anything to come of it. Because doing it in itself is the incremental change. If you are just watching your breathing, by definition, you're not thinking. If you're just watching your breathing, you're not in the past, you're not in the future. You're in this moment. The more you do it, I'm doing it right now, and suddenly I'm realizing time is timeless. And I could just keep doing this. You could all have been gone, and I could just say, well, I'm going to let the mouth continue to move. This is attainable, but the practice is how you get from here to there. So if you think, I know this now, why? And I talked about it so brilliantly, having coffee with my friends the other day, why can't I actually do it? Because the distance between the philosophy that you really believe in and the implementation, what's the practice? Somebody could give a brilliant master class talking about how to learn to play piano. But we already know that they won't achieve anything unless they have a practice of some kind that's not totally dysfunctional, right? Why would the mind be any different? Yeah, I know, love myself, love my mistakes. Okay, that's very popular. That's pop, life, what do they call it? Life coaches. That's a pop life coach. Love yourself. Life coaching is taken off, but a lot of it, how do you get there? If you don't allow yourself to touch the instrument without consequences, then it doesn't matter what you're thinking about. You'll always be vulnerable to them. You just have to find out what it feels like to touch the instrument. And notice everything I play is perfect, even if it's gibberish. Maybe the only thing that goes into perfection when it comes to music is assuming the best, the highest. This is the right thing to play because I played it. That puts you on the magic carpet. Even if you play like shit, you're on the magic carpet.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Brian is asking, can you mention other areas or disciplines where you have experienced the transferability of the 4 steps?
Well, I'm not that accomplished in anything else, so I can't give it. Yeah, I remember shoveling snow, and then I'm thinking, God damn it, this is a big driveway, And then I said, that never ends well, because then every shovel gets harder, right? It's like, oh, I have so many more to do. So I go, okay, I'm not conscious of how much more I have to do. I'm not conscious of anything. I'm watching myself breathe and picking up the shovel, and now I'm focusing on my breathing. Suddenly, a couple of shovelfuls go by, and they have equal effect on me because I'm not thinking about how many more I have to do in front of me. In other words, I came out of the future and I came into the space. And suddenly, I have much less chance of hurting myself if I'm shoveling snow from the space than I'm shoveling it within, from the conscious mind with the expectation that you're going to be done at some point. So little things like that. I mean, I haven't perfected anything else.
Well, I do think you have worked with dancers and composers.
Oh, yeah, but it's the same principle.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that was more
what I have done. Yeah, no, nothing. I mean, yeah.
Well, you do talk about basketball, don't you?
Well, yeah, not that I can play, but I tried shooting baskets and with the dimmest awareness of wanting to get the basket in. And then I said, okay, leaving that out of the equation while I'm watching myself breathe. And for a minute, I am the instrument that sinks the basket. That's the thing you have to understand about these elevated states. They're going to be temporary. They're going to be very temporary. And if you don't have a problem with that, then hang with it. Be grateful when it comes. Be grateful when it leaves. And understand that simply continuing to repeat the practices, you're going to be able to stay in there longer and longer. You get to a certain point when, even when you're out of it, you're in it. Something I've been saying lately, it teases me when I say it. There's this and there's that. And when that becomes this, there's no more that.
Next question is by Harry Bolt. Hi, Kenny. I had a lesson with you when I was visiting the US a few years back. I'm struggling deeply with practicing anxiety at the moment. I have a big gig coming up at the jazz club in Soho. I feel like I'm so outclassed in my field and I don't deserve to be there. I find it hard to work on my craft in fear of judgment and failure. So desperately care for the music and want to contribute. I'm 30 almost. I feel like I peaked a few years ago, but a few years after I graduated. And now I'm letting myself down. It's difficult to find this joy in my playing with so much.
You don't have to read this. I could actually write it for him. Because this is what we do. So first of all, too many things to fix by the time you get this gig. So start thinking about, who am I? Is this gig really define me in any way? Then you start thinking about, well, let me practice detachment, even if I fail to implement it that night. At least I know the right way to go. And finally, I'll say this, right? When people ask me, how do I do enough effortless mastery to succeed on that gig, which is really not how it works, I say this. This gig is a big deal to you right now. Life has meaning if it goes well, and life suddenly became meaningless if it didn't go well because of all the things you're writing, right? So I want you to experiment with a different change of perception. This is what I've said to people. You tell me today you're going out to celebrate after that gig without knowing whether you played well or not. If you commit to that today, you're kind of doing effortless mastery. So, in other words, you could start watching your, whoever that was, you can start watching your breathing and then going back to your worry about the gig. But take a break. Okay, here I am thinking about the gig again. This never really does end well. I'm going to take a break and just watch myself breathe. Okay, now let me go back to obsessing about the gig. But this is what I didn't say before. A lot of times when you take that break and you come back willing to go under the yoke of your delusions again, sometimes you can't find them. It's like, okay, where's that thing that my whole life is what this gig is going to be? Well, it's funny, I don't really feel that way anymore. Sometimes that little break will change the whole thing, and sometimes it won't, which is not your concern. It's not your job to think if it's working or not. It's your job to do it. So I would say do it whenever you think of it from now until the gig. Don't do it right before the gig hoping that that's going to help you out. Just do it because you believe that there is a greater reality than the picture your mind is always painting for you. Wouldn't that be a gain, even if the gig sucked? So in my mind, either way, there's something to celebrate there. But the idea that you're going to say today, this gig, which has been previously really occupying my mind, but also messing with my is life meaningful thing, you know? I'm going to celebrate that night or the next day, no matter how the gig goes, as a way, an action of seriously disarming that pseudo importance. And it is pseudo important because it's all about, it's kind of just narcissistic. Am I going to play and am I on the level of everybody else? And are they going to like it? And then, of course, do I get another gig there? All this stuff, I understand. The problem is, if you're thinking of it, you're less likely to play anything that night. And if you just practice detachment, and let's say it didn't work, you still played like shit. But that's another great opportunity. You already committed to me that you're going to celebrate. So now you have to celebrate and you already know the gig sucked. This is powerful shit. This is powerful stuff. If you don't want to be a hostage to something as small as, is it a good gig, is it a bad? I don't want to be a hostage to events. There's a thing I saw under a statue of Shiva. It said, the luminous one, illumined from within and free from all support. Think about that. You don't lean on your wife. You don't lean on your family. You don't lean on your philosophy. You don't lean on how well you play. You don't lean on anything because you are contained and luminous from within. That just grabbed me. I say, I want to keep practicing for that. And I believe that's sort of an enlightened way to walk on this earth. You know that there are problems. We all know that what's going on. But the question is, you know, am I less of a light any moment than any other moment? Of course not. So my job is to identify more and more with the intensity of that light and less with the things that seem to make it appear to dim. You know, you don't think that the sun dims when the clouds block it because you are understanding outer nature. You don't understand inner nature as well. When the clouds, which are thoughts of inadequacy, are gathering, it's a bad time for me to say, but you do know that you have this infinite light in you, don't you? And you kind of go, yeah, you know. But you don't want to give it up. You want successful things. But just as sure as clouds in the sky never define the power and intensity of the sun, clouds in the form of unfinished or unanswered questions never have anything to do with the light that is you. So I just want to practice remembering that. And again, I find that accessing my breath, when I go into a sort of a tabula rasa, no thoughts, and I'm in this moment, it's not that hard for me to imagine that I am a drop in the ocean of God, whatever the hell that means. But what's relevant to the musician is the performance always elevates. More precision, things you thought were difficult, but they went by before you had a chance to think about it. All kinds of little miracles. The only thing that won't happen is you're not going to play shit you haven't studied. But to me, it's a miracle just not to expect to play the shit you haven't studied. You're happy with what's coming out because that's what you're playing. You know, one could call that reality.
I have two more questions because I'm looking at the time and
Right.
I want to
I
get
just
those
wanted to
two
answer the one
questions
about
in.
how can someone, oh, wait a minute.
Yes, how can someone with a physical limitation of their body allow their body to be the instrument?
By accepting the limitations, totally. And then just keep working at. You know, I have a long story about Miles Davis. Miles Davis changed the face of jazz by obeying his limitations. He couldn't play as fast as Dizzy Gillespie. He couldn't play the bebop changes the way I mean, he could, but he was not special. So he combined the changes into more of a modal thing, and he slowed down the tempo. And because of what Miles Davis could not do that Dizzy Gillespie could do, but Miles believing in himself, that was in fact the birth of the cool. So limitations could be this touchstone of the next music. It depends on how much you believe in you.
Yeah, Richards is saying Django Reinhardt.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And the other question is about singers. We have a way we do the steps with singers, but we don't start with the breath necessarily. I start with imagining that there's a space 3 inches above your head, and there's a bunch of, I don't know if you have all those outer things that I did outside for getting out of your head and into the space, Viv, but I'm fine if you want to put it in the chat. There's different exercises like the breathing exercise that instantly take you out of the mind and into the space. And I demonstrated like 5 or 6 of them, so maybe she can put them in the chat a few years ago now. And I use them in class sometimes. I used them during the pandemic, you know. So with singers, everybody in the class, I have them do this. Feel a space, a flat surface, like about 3 inches above your head. Imagine a flat surface. Now take your hand away. Keep focusing on the flat surface. Again, you find that it's almost total lack of thinking if you're really focusing on that surface. If you're trying to focus on that surface and simultaneously wonder, is this going to be a great thing? Of course, you can't focus on the surface. Now, when you're focusing on the surface, as a singer, keep focusing on it and maybe just a little cognizant of the fact you're breathing. And then you do this. And go back to focusing on that surface, and then as if that note never even happened, let alone what you would do, which is stop thinking about that flat surface and start rating the quality of that note. So this exercise is specifically to take you away from that. Let the note happen. And in the beginning, it never matters what the note sounds like. The idea that the thing that cranked out that note was the courage to take a deep breath. But I wasn't going to sculpt to the note because my mind was somewhere else. It was watching this flat top 3 inches above my head. Now move the flat top 5 inches above your head. That feels different too. Now from there, my funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine, you make me smile with your heart. When a person's blessed with absolutely no vocal lessons and they have gotten this alignment, it's not them singing. But that needs to be practiced way before performance so that you're used to not taking every little moment as what's going to define this performance. You know how fragile that can become. In this case, you're not even there. I always like this joke. I play from the space and I get done and someone comes up and says, Mr. Werner, you really sucked tonight. And I go, wasn't me. I asked the creator, it wasn't me. That is a joke, but on the other hand, you know what I mean? It plays, but that's just going to be a fancy pseudo-spiritual thing to say unless you start practicing little simple of examples of letting it play. And you'll never let it play if you don't accept however it plays. You've heard about unconditional surrender, right? Well, musicians rarely get there because there's one thing they won't surrender: this constant obsessive need to sound good. So let's say you're a very holistic person. You say, I go to Qigong on Tuesdays and I've got a meditation class on Wednesdays. Oh, and then we go on a spirit walk on Thursdays. And then there's my meditation class. You have a whole spiritual week, right? And you get to the instrument and you know that's the way. Surrender. So you're saying some of your language from that path. Okay, I now allow the mauve big kahuna in the peak skies that grants us forgiveness. I surrender to that source. But then in your mind, you're going, in parentheses, but then I'm going to play my ass off. So because of that obsessive need, you really haven't surrendered. So it really hasn't worked. So what's on the other side of not needing to play well? As Shakespeare said, that is the question. But you have to sample it, otherwise it's just an idea, a concept that sounds pretty good.
Awesome.
More, because we should stop.
Yeah, I shared the YouTube you were talking about in the chat for everybody to check it out. The other thing that I'll add to the chat right now is the download page of the meditations that come with the new book. So if you have the new book, you may have seen it already, but there's meditations that Kenny plays on and talks on, and you can download them from this website. So yeah, thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Berkeley alumni. Thanks for everybody for being here. It's been a pleasure, and we hope to stay in touch.
Yeah, we want to, make it.
And maybe you want to play something to take us out. No?
Thank you all so much. I hope
Thank
we
you.
see you again soon.
See you again
Yeah.
soon.
Y'all take care.
Thanks, Kang.
Yeah, you're
Bye,
welcome.
everyone.
Have a good night. Thank you again.
You too.